Today I thought we'd discuss a little bit about player ownership or ownership in general over a career or a pathway. So I've got a few instances at the moment where there's a few players that I'm working with that probably don't own their own development and they're sort of like mid-teens, and I feel like the ownership is almost left to the parents to control, and that's off court. And on court they rely on the coach, myself and the other coaches around the environment. The age-old question came to me this morning from someone about should my child be self-motivated and self-driven because they're not doing enough on their own at home. I feel like that they're not doing enough around, before matches, etc., etc. So the question came to me, and I have answered this in a few different ways a few times. Now, it all depends on the age of the player and where they're at in their development, both socially, emotionally, and in terms of their readiness to, I guess, learn and take responsibility. So when I answered the question this morning, I spoke a little bit about some people have their own self-drive, which is great, and they're really driven to be successful, and some just aren't. Some can learn it through understanding their purpose, and some never learn it. And that's the challenge that we have. Now, I still feel that when kids are kids, they need to be driven to an extent. Now, some more than others, but I think parents and coaches need to play a role in the team around developing or helping to develop the player and helping them to understand their motivations and helping to drive them when things aren't going so well. I think some of the things we can't expect a player to do is to always be self-driven. And that's anyone in life. Like, I go through it as a coach, where sometimes I need external drives to get me going. I have external purposes that get me going, things that drive me to get up every morning to start work at 5:30 in the morning. Whether that's the drive of supporting a family for me or my kids or my own development as a coach. I've got to find what my purpose is, and sometimes we have to tap into different areas of that. But with players and young players in particular, they sometimes don't quite understand their why and their reason why, and why they do things and why they want to be out in the court and what's in it for them and what's their career look like and what's their journey going to be. So they do need help and they do need support. And that's a really, really big part of a child's career, is when they're going off the rails. As a coach, I need to facilitate motivation at times, or I need to help push them through when they're not feeling like they want to get through. So I find that's my role, keeping them on the rails and facilitating rather than always be the driver. So I need to try and help but not be the main source of drive. And the one reason I say that is because as you go along as a coach and players go through the pathway, like I have a few players right at the minute that, some are in college, some are playing pro. And when it gets to that level, if they haven't learned how to drive themselves when things get really hard, and I haven't allowed and facilitated them to learn their own way and in their own time, then it gets to this point when they're playing pro or playing college that they really struggle to motivate themselves. And they struggle to find ways out when things are tough. So my job is to ensure that when players are getting towards the end of their junior journey into their senior journey, that I've given them the tools to be able to think for themselves and act for themselves. So, and it's the same as a parent. Like, I'm a parent of 3 kids, and, it's very easy for me to step in and help my child or children when they're feeling like they don't know the answer to something at school, or when they don't know the answer to something they're doing in their sport. But that doesn't solve the problem long-term. That's the short-term solution. And we're trying to find long-term solutions to these problems. So, it's the questioning that I think is really critical. So why do you think you're feeling like that? Why are we going through this? What can we do differently? What could you have done differently in that match? So the ability for us to open-end questions is really critical to the problem-solving element, and the ability to allow our players to have the ownership over their development. So, I felt like today was one of those days where I was having the conversation with both player and parent around this. And, it happens a lot in our field of work as coaches. We're always trying to find the solutions to problems. And this is an issue that we commonly come up with is, where does that ownership lie? And if it's not sort of a split between player, coach, and parent, obviously with the player owning a little bit more of the piece of the pie of that, then their long-term development's going to be probably hindered if they can't make decisions for themselves and problem solve themselves. So the question did come as who has the ownership, and how do I motivate my player, and who should motivate the player? Does it come down to the player or the parent or the coach? And as I said, it's a split between all three. But if you're out there and you're a player, the most important thing to understand is that you understand why you do it, why you're out on the court, why you want to do it. You know, I asked my players that this morning, why are you getting up at 5 a.m. to train at 6 a.m. if you don't want to be here? If your energy or your intensity is low, why did you get up this morning? Why bother getting up and getting out of your warm bed in the middle of the cold season in Australia here in Melbourne to train if you really don't want to be here? So you got to find your why first. As a coach, you've got to understand the big picture. You got to understand what that picture is we're trying to get our players to do at the end of their junior career, or if they are a pro player, what are we trying to work towards? And I try to work towards the ability for my players to problem solve and make decisions by themselves. So if I'd want that, then I need to open end my questions. I need to facilitate and guide the ownership as opposed to me controlling that. And if I'm a parent out there, I'm just supporting what my player needs, not stepping in all the time and being overbearing. It's the ability for me to step back sometimes, listen, ask questions, facilitate the learning like the coaches, reinforce the messages the coach is giving to the players, rather than trying to create another layer of conversation and more information for the player to digest. They've already got the coach's information. Your job might be to help to reinforce those messages. So if you're out there, you're a player, coach, or parent, hope that helped you today. But thanks for joining us once again. Be sure to log in and check out all the stuff on the Tennis Menu. Hope you're enjoying the content and hope you're enjoying these little videos we're putting together as well.